9:30 a.m. on a Tuesday, and in exactly 30 minutes I was supposed to walk into the Pentagon briefing room to finalize the biggest defense contract of my career. Instead, I was sitting in a sterile conference room watching my boss Richard Norton slide a termination letter across the mahogany table like he was dealing cards. The irony wasn't lost on me. 20 years of service to this country, 12 in uniform as an Air Force major, 8 as a civilian defense contractor, and it all came down to this moment. A piece of paper with my name on it and a severance package that probably cost less than Richard's monthly car payment. My name is Michael Coleman, but everyone calls me Mac. I'm 48 years old, and until that morning I thought I understood how the world worked. You do good work, you protect people, you earn respect. Turns out in corporate America, none of that matters if you're over 40 and someone younger comes along willing to work for less. We're restructuring the engineering department, Richard said, his voice as cold as his handshake always was. His cufflinks caught the fluorescent light as he gestured toward the papers. The board feels we need younger leadership, more agile thinking. Agile thinking. That was corporate speak, for we want someone who won't question our shortcuts. Sitting 2 chairs down was Stephen Walsh, 28 years old, fresh out of MIT with a computer science degree and a smile that screamed ambition. The kid looked like he'd never been in a fight, let alone a war zone. His idea of life or death pressure was probably a coding deadline. "No hard feelings, Mac," Stephen said, like he was doing me a favor. "I'll make sure your work lives on." Your work. My work. The Guardian system I'd spent 4 years building from scratch. The missile defense AI that could predict incoming threats faster than any human operator because it was based on something Stephen had never experienced. Real combat. Richard pushed the packet toward me. "Just sign the papers, Mac. Clean transition. Stephen's been briefed on all your projects." I stared at the documents for a moment, thinking about how I'd gotten here. How a kid from Ohio who'd joined the Air Force to pay for college ended up creating one of the most advanced defense systems in the world, and how that same system was about to be handed over to someone who thought warfare was a video game. The room was dead silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and Stephen tapping his pen against his tablet, probably calculating his signing bonus. "You know," I said quietly, "Guardian isn't just software. It's a classified defense system tied to my federal security clearance." Richard waved me off like I was discussing the weather. "Stephen's been cleared for transfer. Everything's handled through HR." That's when I knew they had no idea what they'd just done. Federal security clearance doesn't transfer like company email accounts. It's earned through years of background. Investigations that go back to when you were in diapers. You can't just hand it to the next guy because he's got a fancy degree and works cheap. But I didn't say that. Not yet. Instead, I thought about Afghanistan. About the night that changed everything and led me to create Guardian in the first place. It was October 2009, Forward Operating Base Chapman, about 40 clicks outside Kandahar. I was a major then, running cybersecurity for our sector. Life was routine. Morning briefings, system checks, the occasional mortar round that landed nowhere important. Then came the night that wasn't routine. I was in the communications bunker around 2 a.m., running diagnostics on our early warning systems, when our perimeter alarms started screaming. Not the usual random sensor trip from a goat or the wind. This was coordinated. Multiple contacts moving fast, coming from 3 directions at once. "Incoming drones," someone shouted over the intercom. Our radar had picked up the signature too. "Late." 5 small unmanned aircraft moving in a coordinated swarm pattern, each carrying enough explosives to level a building. They'd been programmed to attack simultaneously from different angles, overwhelming our defensive response. The problem wasn't our weapons, we had plenty of firepower. The problem was our reaction time. By the time our systems identified the threat, calculated firing solutions, and coordinated responses, those drones would be on top of us. I watched our defensive AI struggle to process multiple incoming targets. It could handle 1, maybe 2 threats efficiently, but 5 coordinated attackers moving at high speed? The system froze for crucial seconds, trying to prioritize targets while the clock ran down. 3 good soldiers died that night. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, who was pulling guard duty on the East Tower. Corporal Johnson, who was running to man the close-in weapon system. Lieutenant Morrison, who was trying to coordinate the response over radio, while shrapnel from the first impact tore through the command post. They died because our technology couldn't think like a soldier under fire. It couldn't make the kind of split-second decisions that come from experience, training, and knowing that real lives hang in the balance. Sitting in that bunker afterward, listening to the distant sound of helicopters bringing in the wounded, I sketched out the first concepts for what would become Guardian, a system that could think like a combat veteran but process data like a supercomputer, something that understood not just the mathematics of incoming threats, but the human cost of being wrong. Mac? Richard's voice snapped me back to the present. We need you to sign these papers. I looked at Stephen, still tapping that pen, probably thinking about his new office and his new salary. Then I looked at Richard, counting the minutes until his Pentagon briefing. Neither of them understood that some things can't be transferred. Some knowledge can't be taught. And some systems won't work for people who've never earned the right to use them. I signed the papers and walked out. Walking out of Apex Defense Solutions that morning felt like leaving a part of myself behind. 20 years of building my career, and it all ended with a handshake from security and a cardboard box with my desk belongings. The American flag on my desk, a gift from my old squadron. The photo of my son at his basic training graduation. A coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Engineer," a gag gift from the team last Christmas. The team that now belonged to Stephen Walsh. I drove home in silence, thinking about Guardian and what I'd really built over those 4 years. It wasn't just an AI system for missile defense, it was institutional memory encoded in software. Every algorithm was based on a real engagement I'd been part of. Every threat assessment protocol came from actual combat experience. When I first pitched Guardian to the Pentagon in 2019, they were skeptical. The military had been burned by defense contractors promising revolutionary AI that turned out to be overhyped garbage. But I had something different. I had credibility. I'd been there when systems failed and good people died because of it. The development process took 4 years because I insisted on doing it right, while other contractors were rushing to market with flashy presentations. I was methodically building something that would actually work under pressure. Guardian learned not just from computer simulations, but from real-world scenarios I'd lived through. The core innovation was what I called combat pattern recognition. Most AI systems analyze threats based on mathematical models, velocity, trajectory, probability matrices. Guardian did that too, but it also recognized behavioral patterns that only came from human experience. The way enemy drones moved in coordinated attacks, the timing patterns of complex assaults, the subtle differences between test flights and actual hostile intent. I'd programmed Guardian with insights that couldn't be taught in any classroom, like how insurgents in Afghanistan would send a single probe drone first, testing response times and defensive positions before launching the real attack 15 minutes later, or how coordinated missile strikes would often include decoy warheads designed to overwhelm defensive systems by creating false targets. Stephen Walsh might understand machine learning algorithms, but he'd never spent a sleepless night listening to incoming mortars, calculating which direction they might come from next. He'd never had to make split-second decisions while watching tracer rounds cut through the darkness. That experience couldn't be downloaded or transferred. It had to be lived. The final security layer I'd built into Guardian was something I called dual lock authentication. The Pentagon required it for all classified AI systems, but most contractors implemented it as a simple biometric scan. I went deeper. Guardian didn't just check fingerprints or retinal scans, it analyzed decision patterns, typing rhythms, even the logical structure of commands entered by the operator. The system had learned to recognize not just who I was, but how I thought, how I approached problems, how I structured tactical assessments. Guardian knew the difference between my methodical, military-trained analysis and someone else's approach. It was designed to work with one person, me, because I was the only person at Apex with the security clearance level required to access the classified threat databases it needed. 3 days after my termination, my phone rang. Richard Norton's name appeared on the screen and I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Mac, his voice was strained, lacking its usual corporate confidence. We need your help. There's been a technical issue with Guardian. What kind of technical issue? Stephen's having trouble accessing the system. We think there might be a software glitch. I almost laughed. A software glitch. When do you need me there? Now, the Pentagon briefing is tomorrow morning, and we can't demonstrate Guardian if it's not working. 20 minutes later, I was back in the building I'd been escorted out of just 3 days earlier. The security desk gave me a visitor's badge, red with external personnel printed in bold letters. The words stung more than I'd expected. The elevator ride to the 5th floor felt longer than usual. When the doors opened, I could hear raised voices coming from the Guardian control room. Through the glass walls, I could see Stephen at the main terminal, sweat visible on his forehead despite the air conditioning. Around him, a crowd of technicians stood looking helpless. Richard rushed over when he saw me. "Mac, thank God you're here. We've been trying to access Guardian for hours." I looked at the main display screen. Guardian's interface was locked on the authentication page, waiting for credentials that Stephen clearly didn't have. A simple message blinked in the center. Federal authorization required. Clearance level, TSSCI. "What seems to be the problem?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Stephen looked up from the terminal. His MIT confidence completely evaporated. "The system won't accept my login credentials. It keeps asking for some kind of federal authorization code. Did you try the override protocols?" "That's what I've been doing for the past 3 hours, Stephen snapped, frustration evident in his voice. "Nothing works. The system just keeps cycling back to this authentication screen." I walked over to the terminal and looked at the command history. Stephen had indeed tried every standard override he could think of. Reset commands, administrative bypasses, even attempting to access the system through backdoor maintenance protocols. Each attempt had been logged and rejected. "Stephen," I said calmly, "show me your security clearance documentation." He fumbled through a folder on his desk and pulled out several papers. I recognized them immediately. Standard facility clearance forms, the kind that let you access the building after hours and use the company computers. Basically worthless for anything classified. "This is a facility clearance," I explained. "Guardian requires a federal top-secret clearance with special compartmented information access. That's a completely different level of security authorization." The room went quiet except for the hum of servers and the soft whir of cooling fans. "What are you saying?" Richard demanded, his face starting to flush. "I'm saying Stephen doesn't have the clearance level required to operate Guardian. The system is working exactly as designed." Stephen's face went pale. But you transferred everything to me. All the project files, the documentation. I transferred the technical documentation that I was authorized to share. The classified components remain, locked to federal clearance holders only. That would be me. Richard's expression shifted from confusion to anger. "Fix it. Right now." I shook my head slowly. "I can't fix what isn't broken, Richard. And even if I could, I'm no longer an employee here." That's when Stephen made his first real mistake. Stephen's frustration finally got the better of him. Instead of asking for help or admitting he was out of his depth, he did what inexperienced people always do when they can't solve a problem. He tried to force it. "There has to be a master override," he muttered, turning back to the terminal. "Every system has backdoors." I watched him start typing override commands, trying to bypass Guardian's security protocols. Each keystroke was being logged by the system, and each failed attempt was escalating the security response. But Stephen was too focused on proving he could handle this to notice the warnings starting to appear at the bottom of his screen. "Stephen," I said quietly, "I wouldn't recommend that approach." He ignored me, typing faster now. "I know what I'm doing. This is just corporate bureaucracy dressed up as security." That comment told me everything I needed to know about Stephen Walsh. He thought Guardian was like any other software system he'd worked on in college or at his previous startup job. He had no concept of what federal security protocols actually meant or why they existed. "Warning, unauthorized access attempt detected," appeared on the screen in yellow text. Stephen kept typing. "Just a scare tactic. All systems have these." Richard was pacing behind us now, checking his watch every few seconds. "How long is this going to take?" "The Pentagon briefing is in 18 hours. "Almost got it," Stephen said, though his voice lacked confidence now. The warnings on his screen were multiplying, shifting from yellow to orange. "Final warning. Continued unauthorized access attempts will initiate lockdown protocol. Stephen?" I tried again. "You need to stop." "I'm a systems engineer," he snapped without looking up. "I can handle a security prompt." He entered another override command. The screen flashed red. "Security breach detected. Initiating lockdown protocol." Every terminal in the room went dark. The main server banks powered down with a sound like a dying generator. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in an eerie red glow. The massive wall displays that normally showed Guardian's operational status were now displaying a single message in white text against a black background. Guardian system lockdown active. Federal oversight required. Silence fell over the room like a heavy blanket. The only sounds were the hum of emergency power and Stephen's rapid breathing. "What did you do?" Richard's voice was barely controlled. I was trying to reset the authentication," Stephen stammered, staring at his dark screen. I walked over to one of the auxiliary terminals and entered my access code. The system came back online, immediately for my session, displaying a status message that made me smile despite the situation. Lockdown armed, awaiting clearance holder verification. "Here's what happened," I explained to the room, keeping my voice calm and professional. Guardian detected repeated unauthorized access attempts by someone without proper federal clearance. The system responded exactly as programmed. It locked down and is now waiting for verification from an authorized clearance holder. Richard's face had gone from red to pale. "You have to fix this, right now." "Actually, I don't have to do anything," I said. "You fired me 3 days ago, remember? I'm not an employee of Apex Defense Solutions anymore. But you're still under contract with the Pentagon." "No, Richard. My contract was with Apex. When you terminated my employment, you broke that contract. According to federal regulations, when a defense contractor loses its cleared personnel, the classified systems revert to direct federal oversight." The implications were starting to sink in around the room. Technicians were looking at each other with growing alarm. Stephen was staring at his dark screen like it might suddenly come back to life. Richard pulled out his phone. "I'm calling our Pentagon liaison." "Good idea," I said. "They'll want to know why their $1.8 billion system just went into emergency lockdown." For the next hour, I watched Richard make increasingly desperate phone calls. First to the Pentagon liaison, who was in a meeting and couldn't be reached. Then to his own corporate lawyers, who clearly had no idea how to handle a federal security incident. Finally to the CEO of Apex, who was apparently on a golf course in Florida and wasn't taking calls. Meanwhile, Stephen sat slumped in his chair staring at error logs that documented every mistake he'd made. Each failed override attempt was time-stamped and cataloged. The system had been watching him, learning from his behavior, and determining whether he represented a security threat. He did. Around noon, the phones started ringing. Not just Richard's phone, every phone in the building. Reception desk, department heads, even the cafeteria. When a classified defense system goes dark unexpectedly, people notice. Important people. "Mr. Norton," a security guard appeared in the doorway. "There are some federal agents here to see you." Richard's face went white. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see black SUVs in the parking lot. Men in dark suits were walking through the lobby with the kind of purposeful stride that meant serious business. "Mac," Richard turned to me with desperation in his eyes. "You have to help us. Tell them this was just a misunderstanding." I looked around the room, at Stephen, who'd tried to hack a federal defense system because he thought security protocols were corporate bureaucracy. At Richard, who'd fired his only cleared engineer to save money. At the dozens of technicians who were now realizing their jobs might disappear because of executive incompetence. "It wasn't a misunderstanding," I said quietly. "It was exactly what it appears to be. A security breach." The conference room door opened and 3 federal agents walked in, followed by someone I recognized immediately. Colonel William Hayes, my old squadron commander from Afghanistan. Bill looked exactly the same as he had 10 years ago. Graying hair, steel gray eyes, and the kind of bearing that comes from years of making life and death decisions. "Gentlemen," the lead agent said, flashing his credentials. "Agent Martinez, Department of Defense Inspector General's Office. We're here about the security incident involving the Guardian system." Richard tried to stand up straighter, putting on his corporate executive persona. "Agent Martinez, there's been a misunderstanding. We had a minor technical glitch during a routine system update." Agent Martinez looked at Richard for a long moment, then turned to Colonel Hayes. "Colonel," Bill stepped forward, and I saw him notice me for the first time. His face broke into a slight smile. "Mac Coleman. Should have known you'd be in the middle of this." "Hello, Bill. Still causing trouble for officers who don't know what they're doing?" "Something like that." Agent Martinez consulted his tablet. Mr. Norton, according to our logs, the Guardian system detected multiple unauthorized access attempts by someone without appropriate clearance. The system responded by initiating an emergency lockdown. Is that accurate? Richard looked around the room like he was searching for an escape route. Well, technically, yes, I interrupted. That's exactly what happened. Bill turned to Stephen, who was still sitting at his dark terminal. And you are? Stephen Walsh. I'm the new senior engineer. What's your clearance level, Mr. Walsh? Stephen held up his facility badge. I have full access to all Apex systems. Bill examined the badge and handed it back. This is a facility clearance. It lets it's you into the building and use the coffee machine. Do you have a federal security clearance? Stephen's voice was barely a whisper. No. Agent Martinez made a note on his tablet. Mr. Norton, are you telling us that you assigned a classified defense system to someone without appropriate security clearance? The room was silent except for the hum of emergency power and the distant sound of more vehicles arriving outside. Richard opened his mouth, but no words came out. The federal investigation took exactly 6 hours. By 6 p.m., Agent Martinez had interviewed every employee with access to Guardian, reviewed all system logs, and documented a security violation that would make headlines in defense news for weeks. Richard spent most of that time in a conference room with corporate lawyers who'd driven up from Washington, their faces getting grimmer with each new revelation. Stephen had been escorted to a separate room where he was being questioned about his unauthorized access attempts. Through the glass walls, I could see him gesticulating frantically, probably trying to explain that he was just doing his job. Bill Hayes found me in my old office, where I was helping Agent Martinez understand Guardian security architecture. Mac, Bill sat down across from my empty desk. Walk me through what happened here. The real story. I told him everything. How I'd built Guardian based on our experiences in Afghanistan. How the system was designed to protect American soldiers by learning from real combat situations. How Richard had fired me to cut costs, then tried to hand over a classified defense system to someone without clearance. So they basically gave a $1.8 billion weapons system to someone who couldn't pass a background check? Bill shook his head. That's not just incompetence, that's criminal negligence. Gets worse, I said. Stephen tried to override the security protocols when the system wouldn't let him in. Guardian interpreted that as a hostile takeover attempt. Bill was quiet for a long moment. You know, in Afghanistan, when someone tried to compromise our systems, we called that sabotage, I remember. Agent Martinez finished reviewing the technical logs and turned to us. Mr. Coleman, I need to ask, did you program Guardian to lock down if someone without clearance tried to access it? Yes. It's standard protocol for classified AI systems. The Pentagon requires it. And did you know this would happen when Apex fired you? I thought carefully before answering. I knew Guardian was designed to protect itself from unauthorized access. I didn't know Apex would be stupid enough to try it. Bill laughed. Same old Mac, always prepared for other people's mistakes. By evening, the scope of Apex's security violations was becoming clear. Not only had they assigned classified work to someone without clearance, but Stephen's override attempts had triggered a federal incident that required immediate Pentagon oversight. Even worse, the company had misrepresented their capabilities to the Pentagon, claiming they had the personnel to manage Guardian when they clearly didn't. Richard was escorted out in handcuffs around 8 p.m. The sight of him being walked through the lobby by federal agents, past all the employees who'd watched him fire me 3 days earlier, was something I'll remember forever. He kept his head down, but I could see the defeat in his shoulders. Stephen lasted until the next morning, when Agent Martinez showed him the federal statute about unauthorized access to classified systems, a felony carrying up to 10 years in prison. He broke down completely, started crying about his student loans and his career prospects. The federal prosecutor offered him a deal, full cooperation in exchange for reduced charges. He took it. Within a week, Apex Defense Solutions had lost every federal contract they held. The Pentagon doesn't mess around when contractors compromise security. Other defense agencies followed suit: NSA, CIA, DHS. Word spreads fast in the defense community when someone can't be trusted with classified work. The company folded within 2 months. 500 people lost their jobs because two executives thought they could cut corners with national security. I felt bad for the engineers and technicians who got caught in the fallout, but that's what happens when leadership fails. As for me, Bill Hayes made sure I landed on my feet. The Pentagon wants to hire you directly, he told me over coffee a week after the investigation concluded. Civilian position, GS-15 level, full authority over Guardian development. They're also talking about renaming it the Coleman Protocol. I almost turned down the promotion. I just want to do the work, Bill. I don't need my name on anything. It's not about ego, Mac. It's about accountability. The Pentagon wants everyone to know that Guardian was built by someone who earned the right to build it. Someone with skin in the game. The offer was everything. I'd wanted in my career. Good pay, meaningful work, and the respect that comes from serving your country. But the best part was knowing that Guardian would continue protecting American soldiers overseas. 3 months later, I was sitting in a Pentagon briefing room, the same one where I was supposed to present Guardian before everything went sideways at Apex. This time, I was wearing a federal ID badge instead of a visitor's pass. The system was operational again, deployed to 3 military bases in high-threat areas. During its first month online, Guardian successfully intercepted 2 drone attacks and 1 missile strike that might have killed dozens of American service members. My son called me from Kuwait the day after Guardian stopped its first real attack. Dad, his voice was crackling over the satellite phone. The guys here are talking about some new defense system that saved a convoy yesterday. They're calling it the Coleman Protocol. I smiled, sitting in my new office with its view of the Pentagon courtyard. Yeah, I heard about that. You wouldn't know anything about it, would you? Maybe a little. Well, whoever built it, tell them thanks from all of us over here. I promised I would. Richard Norton's congressional testimony was broadcast on C-SPAN 6 months later. Watching him try to explain how Apex had compromised national security to save money on engineering salaries was better entertainment than anything on television. He kept using phrases like cost optimization and resource allocation, corporate speak for "we fired the only guy who knew how to do the job." The congressman questioning him was a veteran himself, and he wasn't buying any of it. Mr. Norton, are you telling this committee that you fired a decorated military officer with 20 years of experience and replaced him with someone who couldn't pass a security clearance? We made personnel decisions based on operational efficiency. That's a yes or no question, Mr. Norton. Richard's silence said everything. Stephen Walsh disappeared from the defense industry entirely. Last I heard, he was working for a tech startup in California, probably telling everyone about his experience with classified government projects. Some people never learn. As for me, I'm still here, doing the work I was born to do, building systems that protect the people who serve. Every day, Guardian processes thousands of potential threats, making split-second decisions that keep American soldiers safe. The system still recognizes my voice, my typing patterns, my decision-making process. It knows me not just as its creator, but as someone who understands what's at stake when the technology fails. Someone who's been there when good people died because the tools weren't good enough. That's the difference between building software and building weapons. Software might crash, and you lose some data. Weapons fail, and you lose lives. Richard Norton learned that lesson the hard way. Stephen Walsh, learned it the hard way. And now every defense contractor in America knows what happens when you try to cut corners with classified systems. Some battles you win with bullets. Some you win with courage. But this one I won with code. And with the simple understanding that experience matters, competence matters, and some jobs are too important to give to the lowest bidder. I'm Michael Coleman. I'm 48 years old, and I just proved that honor and expertise will always beat greed and arrogance. The Guardian system is still protecting our troops. Richard Norton is still under federal investigation. And I'm still here, doing what I love. That's justice served military style. Quiet, efficient, and absolutely final. In the real world, there's no substitute for experience earned under fire. You can't download wisdom from a textbook or learn integrity from a PowerPoint presentation. The military teaches you that competence and character matter more than politics and profit margins. And eventually, the truth always comes out in the wash.